I'm glad to introduce you my new guest here. I'll be glad if you can say your name, because I suppose I will pronounce it badly.
Andrea Angiolino.
Okay, so you are author of game series containing Wings of War, Wings of Glory, and also Battlestar Galactica, right?
Yes, and Sails of Glory is another series that we are playing here.
Okay, so right now we are happy to have you here. The opportunity is like Wings, or there are many or more of your games played here right now.
Well, actually, those are played, all of them, and then there is a prototype of S55 Wings over the Ocean, and this is pretty different. All the others are combat games, and this one instead is a game of civilian flights. Even if the S55 was a military seaplane, some civilian and many military Italian pilots used them for flying across the ocean, trying to do at least. So the scenarios are all the crossings by Italian or Brazilian pilots. One board represents all the route from Italy across the African coast and the ocean to Brazil. And the other map is the Italy, Amsterdam, Reykjavik, Chicago, New York route, or you can take it by south. And there are two sets of rules, one for individual planes that try to go across, and you have the fatigue for the crew and damages to the plane, and all the cards have real episodes up to the explosion of your plane with a stand-byer who throws a cigarette while you are fueling. And this happened to the Pinedo in Northern America after he went all across the two Americas. The other rules are for mass flights, because the first attempts were for single planes, and Italo Balbo said, if we want to show that planes can go across even with passenger or post, it's not just the single plane that has to go. We have to demonstrate it with 12 or 24 planes, and he did it. This game represents that.
Nice. So it's quite different from what you did before, because you mainly designed war games. Is it correct?
Well, from those lines, it's different, because they are all war games somehow, with the First and Second World War planes, with the sail ships, with the Battlestar Galactica starship, and even with the Martian tripods. There is a variant for Wings of Glory with the Martian tripods of the War of the Worlds. But this is different. The map is the whole ocean, and you go across continents. So, and there is no combat, so it has a pretty different feelings. Actually, I designed several more games, children games, or games about Ulysses, or Isla Dorada with Alan Moon and Faidutti. So I'm not just a wargamer designer, but the most famous, especially abroad, are the Wings of Glory lines and the similar ones.
Okay, can you tell us what is so specific on Wings of Glory? What will differentiate it from the other war games?
Yes, it was an idea exactly 20 years ago. It was released, and I played a lot of simulations in the 70s and the 80s. They made simulations that were very accurate, usually with X-grid maps. And you had a lot of pages of rules and tables to simulate all the difference between troops or between planes and so on. And the big question was, for a designer, if to skip the details to have a simple game, a playable one, or if to put a lot of details, so have a lot of rules and a very difficult game to handle. Fun, but for very fond players that studied a lot of rules and handled a lot of points and charts. What I tried to do, it was to make a simple simulation with a lot of detail for people that grow up with video games, just trying without studying rules. Studying rules was very difficult when 20 years ago, because when I was a kid, we got games like Risk, and we could study 12 pages of rules and then explain to other 8 or 10 years old kids. Now adults have difficulties with Risk because they are not used anymore to read manuals. Even when they buy a new phone, they just try, while when we bought a videotape, for example, we studied the manual first. That is lost. So I wanted a game with very few rules, but with a lot of details. So I studied this game with decks of maneuvers for different planes. And the rules is, in the First World War, for example, that just choose 3 of those maneuvers, put them in a pile, and use one by one. There are arrows, so you put the arrow in front of the plane, and then the plane on top of the arrow, and your plane flies on the table. But even if it's so simple, or the planes are realistic, your camel turns more to the right than to the left because it has a rotary engine, and the Fokker 7 hangs up to the propeller and turns on the spot, as the real one did. And this is because every deck has different arrows, and the maneuverability, the special maneuvers, are in the shape of the arrows and the quantity of cards in each deck. The speed is not points that you have to spend and you have to handle, but it's just longer arrows for the quicker planes and shorter arrows for the slower one. So even if the rule is simple, choose 3 cards, all the details are there. And the same for combat and everything. So it's something that I say that the difficulty is concealed inside the materials, and the details are embedded in the materials. So we have a champion that's 8 years old here, and it's not a problem. He has a spatial view, he has tactics, he can bluff, but he has not to care of too many rules and points and everything. That's what I try to do. It seems to work because after 20 years we're still there.
Games are still on our tables, so that's really good. So you started your career as a journalist or a game journalist, or how it was? Because I've read that you studied economics.
Yes.
Have you ever done it as a work?
Later, far later, because when I was still in high school, I was xeroxing some prototypes with hexagons. Somebody said, well, that's war game, I have a friend, you can meet him. And this friend of him was the chief redactor of a game magazine newspaper kiosk. And they had nobody writing about role-playing game. I did role-playing games, so I got a column when I was in high school. I thought it was just a hobby. Then I was even paid, and it helped me to become journalist. I thought it was not something to make a living off, writing about games or making games, so I started studying economics. But while I was studying, I got in contact with a very rare thing in Italy in the 90s. That was a little society of a little company of game designers, professional game designers. So I started making games for magazine, making games for TV or radio, or even some board games. And that was the start of the career, and of being very, very late with my graduation. Then there was the draft. I lost 1 year, stopped working for a while, and then I restarted working in companies just for a few months to recover the time lost in the military. And then I stayed in companies even later. Now I'm in a company working in gambling for the state. The only gambling allowed in Italy is managed by the state. I worked for that in my office time, and the graduation helped with it. And for the rest, I work on my own games, and I speak about games at the radio. I teach game culture at the university. I write articles for game magazines. So yeah, it's still maybe sometime I will drop the office and keep the rest. But
so what do you think you are the most? Are you a designer, journalist, or your office work is the most?
No, I feel more a game designer, and even in the office it helped, even if it's a design of scratch lotteries online and things like this. And then the rest come. I think it helps to study games, to study the story of game. I wrote a dictionary of games with all the language, the words used, but then the definition of games are mostly the rules. So this dictionary is also a game manual. I think that studying all of these helps to be a designer, but my feelings is that I'm still mainly a designer.
Okay. Do you also spend your time making journalism also about the digital games? I mean, like video games?
No, not so much. I prefer to maybe some time to write about comics or military museum or other subjects that are somehow related to my games. But video games need huge... It's like making movies, while board game is like writing books. So, and making movies, where it's better to do that than in Hollywood, where you have huge companies. And the same for video games. In Italy, we don't do much about video games. Maybe just some serious game for some company. I did one for the scientific police as a mean of explaining to people how they work and to make some recruitment maybe. So I did some kind of specific video game for companies or for entities, but not really games on the market. And I'm not so much interested in them, even as a player. We have what I'd like to play is the official app for Wings of Glory. Dire Wolf took a license and did a very faithful app. So you play exactly, yeah. And it's the same feeling of the table. And it's fun because I can play it with my friends in Prague, in England, and in America by distance, even when we don't have the chance to come here to play together. But for the rest, I'm not so fond of video games anyway.
Okay. I also read that the Italian school ministry chose you in 1999 to be a consultant for the games in school. So you somehow participated in introducing board games to educational system?
Yeah, several kind of games. We also did contests of magazine with word games that we call enigmistica. There is a lot of anagrams, crosswords, and so on made by children. They made their own magazines and so on. I did a lot with game books, even choose your own adventure game books, and even writing them with children. They wrote them, I helped them. We did something with role-playing games, so not specifically board games.
And have you ever designed any role-playing game?
Yes, several. I did one, Cavalieri del Tempo, was about Templar Knights trying to address the history with secret mission in time. And I did one about Dragon Ball and 2 board games too, several ones. And I did expansions and things with other role-playing game. Last time, not with my game, it was Lex Arcana by Venetian, Maggine, Pitello, Colovini and De Toffoli, Ancient Rome with magic, like our Cavalieri del Tempio was Middle Ages with the magic that was believed true at at the time. Lexicon is the same with Ancient Rome. We did a Kickstarter and it was quite a huge success. So sometimes I also work for other games. I did a supplement about Italy with my friend Francesca, and I helped to bring it back on the market.
Okay.
It worked quite well, yeah.
When you are designing a new game, or you're up to a new game, where are you search for new mechanics and new topics for your games?
Well, almost everywhere. I mean, if it's from my passions, I start from the setting. So for the S55, I started reading again all the books, the diaries of those people who did those intercontinental flight 100 years ago or more or less. And so I start from the setting. Sometimes I just try to invent something different in mechanics. So I just think what could be new. And a game about Ulysses came out because I thought that usually everyone moves his own pawn, but something different is to have one pawn that everybody moves. So what could be? It could be, for example, Ulysses and the players are the gods, so the map is the Mediterranean and so on. So you can start for any kind of settings or materials or whatever.
So usually the setting is the first that is in your game. I mean, you are start with the topic, or usually with the mechanics, and you are trying to think up a good topic on it.
Yeah, both. Usually from the topic, like the Wings of Glory. Sometimes from the mechanic, like in this example of Ulysses. So it depends.
Okay. Is it easier for you to work alone, to design your game alone, or do you like to cooperate with other designers on some bigger project?
No, I like to cooperate, even not only with game designers. I do several things with Andrea Mainini or other designers, but sometimes even with fond players expert in something. So Francesca Garello was less a designer when we did Italia for Lex Arcana or a game book about ancient Rome, but she's an archaeologist, so we are complementary. She knows the setting far more than me, and his husband Gregory, he's an historian of aviation, so we wrote a game about torpedo bombers. He's also a wargamer and he published a couple of them, but we are complementary. I do a lot of things together with others. And there is a funny game that is 5 steps from Kevin Bacon. You have to connect 2 actors through movies made with an actor in common. And someone plays 5 steps from Bruno Faidutti, because Bruno Faidutti has a lot of authors, and somebody tried also to make maps of cooperation, and Faidutti is a huge point of the net with a lot of connection. When they did the Italian map, I was maybe the one with more connections around. So Maggi and Nepitello got the idea of the war in the words variants of Wings of Glory, so Mainini is for Sails of Glory and other things. And I have several cooperation, and I'm pretty proud of that.
Do you think, because it seems you are traveling a lot, do you think there is some specifics in Italian board game scene in compared with the other countries?
Yeah, we are quite not so well advanced. We were quite behind the others. Now we have plenty of authors in the last years, and of good ideas, and even of small publishers that went big, like Da Vinci with Bang, and then many others, or Nexus with the War of the Ring. So we grew along the years, and now it's pretty lively. as a scene, but I think still not as lively as of course, the German scene, but even the French, of course, the British and the American are larger. And I don't know if it's still true that there are German style and American style games. The German is more abstract with a theme passed on. The American is more full of theme. But maybe there was also an Italian style with a good compromise of rules connected to the setting, to the theme, but in a more clean and elegant way than with the American, full of counters and dice and everything, and maybe with even a bit more attention on style and drawings and so on. I don't know if it's still true, but that was a tendency.
Mm-hmm. And what do you like to play? I mean, are there any games that you always would like to play and never?
Well, there are several. Now, with a growing girl in the house, I went playing on the games she also like. So maybe detective games, escape rooms are the kind that in this moment are more likely to be played. But there are a few games, the most elegant usually, like, I don't know, there was a Pinco Pallino that we sold. One of the rare cases was an agent as a corridor to Gigamic, and that's pretty elegant. There is the labyrinth that is always fascinating. This is a game I like a lot. Or Boogle with words that you have to make dice with letters and form. And this happens maybe a bit less, but one of the very few games on the telephone I play is Razzle. That's more or less the same thing. So yeah, in the end I prefer simple games and elegant. That's my tendency.
Okay, and among, I don't know, 1 or 2 years old games, is there anything that caught your attention that you...
Not really, even because I have friends making reviews on magazines and they are always up to date, and with them I can try new things, but this is pretty rare. Usually I'm too much involved in the development and playtesting of mine, or when I have chance in playing in the family. So okay, yeah, so Deckscape, for example, some Deckscape titles by Chiacchiera and Sorrentino were very fun. I don't even know if they were 2 years old or maybe 3 or 4, so okay, but we liked them a lot. And yeah, but not really. A few years ago, it was I liked a lot King Domino, for example, even in the line that I could play in the family. But yeah, I think I should play more new games and be more updated and less self-concentrated, but time is not so much.
Sure. So Andrea, thank you for your time. I'm really glad that you find some and we could have shoot this interview and enjoy the rest of this.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.